All right. I'm actually going to put this on a timer so that I don't go over when it's time for Dickie to start. Okay. All right. Okay. I guess we'll get right to prayers because we have a lot to cover today. So we'll just go through our prayers, and I'm trying to get through this section 6. I'm calling it section 6, emptiness in the middle way, and it's a possibility that could happen today. Okay. Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chinyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye druparsho. Sangye chodang soki chognam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi jinso gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye druparsho. Sangye chodang soki chognam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki rola penchir sangye druparso. For immeasurables, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May those of us who are on the Bodhisattva path be blessed and inspired to have the power to be able to do this. Okay, then the 7-limb prayer. Visualize your merit field as you can. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And then the mandala. Sajipati Jukshing Medo Tramri Rablingji Nidegen Parti Sangye Jingdu Mideuragi Dropunam Dachin La Chapasho Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Yiryatayam. Okay, today we have Yadamahetu and Nagarjuna stanza. Today we're going to do this. All right, we'll just go ahead and do it in Sanskrit. Om Ye Dharma Hetu Prabhava Hetu Tesham Tathagato Yabhava Tesham Cha Yo Nirodha Evam Vahi Mahashramanana Soha. And stanza 5 of Nagarjuna's 18th chapter. By extinguishing actions and afflictions, there is liberation. Actions and afflictions arise from misconceptions, and misconceptions arise from elaborations. Elaborations will cease through cultivating emptiness. And of course, that's precisely what we're talking about. Where we were in this particular section is Shantideva was, he sort of set up a debate between Hinayana and Mahayana. I mentioned last week that Hinayana was a name given by the Mahayana tradition for the other schools that were not Mahayana. And Hinayana means small path, Mahayana means great path. And in the view of the Mahayanists, they had teachings that were given to the Buddha, given by the Buddha to disciples who had very pure levels of karma. I mean, pure levels of karma. And so these were teachings that were not necessarily for the general public, because the general public wouldn't have grasped them, or may have even been afraid of them. So Mahayana believes that they have the entire teachings of the Buddha. Of course, the Hinayanas don't even accept the fact that they were named Hinayanas by the Mahayanas. And so they have, there are many different traditions. The most well-known one today is Theravada. Theravada is a Hinayana, or what would be called Hinayana path. But there were, in the four tenets, when we talk about the two Hinayana schools, if you just take Vaibhashika alone, there were at least 18 separate Hinayana schools who had different ideas about different things. So it's not that they are in total agreement with one another. And so this is kind of what this section is talking about. So we were at the point where His Holiness was discussing what occurred with the Mahayanas, the Mahayana followers, and he started getting into tantric, that the Buddha was teaching tantric practices for those who had a very, very pure karma. And that's kind of where we left off. And the tantric practices are for someone who, I mean, if you're going to even engage in tantra, the teachers will tell you that you have to have at least an understanding of what emptiness is, and you have to have at least a feeling of bodhicitta, that you want to become enlightened for the benefit of sentient beings. Otherwise, tantra is pointless, because what tantra is it's a kind of a way of developing quickly the path, the Bodhisattva path, that goes all the way to enlightenment, and it has different kinds of techniques and practices to quickly get you to do this. So he's saying, we'll go back to where we were, sort of towards the end of this part. So there were various kinds of tantric practices that he was teaching, and that's all part of the Mahayana. His Holiness says that it's not possible for a gross consciousness to transform into omniscient wisdom. Only a subtle mind, only a subtle consciousness can do that. So to facilitate this, the Buddha revealed practices to focus the mind on what are called the channels, wind energies, and drops of the subtle human anatomy. These were given only to those disciples of the utmost purity. So if you're interested in sort of an introduction to the channels, winds, and drops, and I know some of you have this book. This is Death, Intermediate State, and Rebirth. In the chapter on taking birth, which is chapter 3. Chapter on taking birth is a really good introduction to these energy channels, winds, and drops. They're very important when you're getting into a tantric practice. So it would be good to familiarize yourself. It would be good for me to familiarize myself with these things. If you're interested in going further into the path in this way,
you need a valid
personal
teacher.
Absolutely, you have to have a.
It's sort of like you can't learn to be You need a coach.
You know, you need a really good coach for anything. If you're going to do
hands-on
anything and you're going to do it to
No, if you're gonna get into that, you just absolutely have to have it.
No, I'm saying just if you're doing anything, like you were saying, if
Oh,
you're
yeah,
gonna,
yeah.
you're gonna learn how to play the violin, you need a very, very good teacher. And if you're serious about it, you know, getting to a very high
This is
level.
more like flying an airplane, because they say
Yeah.
if you don't get proper instruction, you can really get very, very diluted.
Right. So you'd actually have, you would have somebody who gave you an empowerment. For instance, the person who gave us the empowerment was His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And it was recommended by Geshe Drakpa, who, you know, then worked very closely with us. So we were extremely fortunate, Kabir and I, and the people who were under Geshe Drakpa's care or guidance. And still, Tantra holds great mysteries. So that it's a big thing. But this is part of the Mahayana. And then also to disciples that had like really great increasing purity, the Buddha would appear like personally to them. An example of this, the Buddha Manjushri appeared to Tsongkhapa, and then for a long time, Tsongkhapa was just learning from this Buddha Manjushri. And the Buddha Manjushri appeared to him in his, you know, his subtle energy body. So and His Holiness says there's absolutely no reason why that couldn't happen today. If somebody has a very pure karma, very pure intention, they're very serious and high level on the path, then a Buddha could appear to them. His Holiness says no doubt about it, a Buddha could appear to them. So that's all part of the Mahayana tradition, which is not included in the Hinayana or Theravada. They don't go that far with it. So according to His Holiness, the distinction of great vehicle and small vehicle, Mahayana and Hinayana, it was not made to demonstrate contempt for the Hinayana. Followers of the Mahayana should actually study all of the Hinayana teachings. They're all part actually of the Mahayana. It's not like, you know, it's not like Mahayana is that different from Hinayana. Mahayana just is a broader version of Hinayana. It takes Hinayana to places that the Hinayana doesn't go, but all of the Hinayana is important. So the distinction between the two vehicles, he says, is made in terms of their different presentations of one, the basis of spiritual practice, meaning what is the basis? Why are you on this spiritual practice? Are you on a spiritual practice because you want to get out of samsara, be free from suffering, and just be liberated and you know get out? Are you on a spiritual practice of following a spiritual path because yes, you want to be liberated from samsara, but you also want to go all the way to enlightenment so that you can actually be of benefit to sentient beings eternally for infinity? And that's quite a different motivation. And then the extent of the motivation and the practice along the spiritual path, how much are you practicing? What level are you at? How much is it part of your every moment of the day? Or is it just, you know, you're going to do a little bit in the morning, a little bit at night, and, you know, call it a practice? It's the extent of the practice. And then the third is the degrees of awakening due to different levels of purity and realization. So the more time that goes by, the more you practice, the more you'll have these little ahas, these little, what I call them like mini realizations. And it's sort of like gradually going up the rungs of a ladder. And that builds on itself so that you're able to have even more realizations and higher realizations. So these are the way, and the Mahayana path will take you to higher and higher levels. So some people suggest that we use the terms Shravaka vehicle, or if you recall, Shravaka meant hearers. These are Hinayana, people who just listen to the Dharma, and by listening to the Dharma, they are able to achieve a kind of a liberation from samsara. Then there are the Pratyeka Buddhas. The Pratyeka Buddhas are called, we talk about this also, lone Buddhas or solitary Buddhas. Their whole purpose is to be liberated from the cyclic existence, become enlightened so that they can just be in a state of solitary nirvana. In other words, they're not, the idea is to not be helping all other, sentient beings. The idea is they're out of it and they're just just a solitary nirvana for all time or something like that. So that would be the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle, and then the Bodhisattva vehicle, which we know that's what we're studying. It's the whole purpose is to benefit sentient beings, and so you're taking a very, very broad view and a long path all the way to enlightenment. So now we go into the arguments for the authenticity of the Mahayana, and this is stanza 44. The true monk is the root of Dharma, and to be a monk is difficult indeed. It's hard for minds enmeshed in thoughts to pass beyond the bonds of suffering. So a lot of this is His Holiness's commentary, and he's saying that without the view of emptiness in the way that is revealed in the Mahayana Sutras, it's impossible to attain any state of awakening, of actual real awakening. The root of the Dharma, or the perfect doctrine, is the true monk, the perfect monk. But to be a perfect monk is not an easy thing. It's not an easy matter. I remember Lama Pasang saying, you have no idea how difficult this is. You have no idea what a monk has to do. And I know, if you remember, do you remember that guy who came, what was his name? Sean, and he came with his teacher from India. And Sean had been he'd taken monastic vows, and he'd been in the monastery. And he said, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And he eventually left because it was so difficult, so difficult. So a perfect monk is one who has abandoned negative motion, abandoned all negative emotions. It's difficult for a monk to achieve that because it's impossible to eliminate negative emotions without a realization of emptiness. So the perfect monk is one that has had a realization of emptiness, and I imagine that's somewhat rare, I don't know. You never do know. If the afflictive negative emotions are not eliminated, one cannot become an arhat and achieve nirvana. Now, if you recall, an arhat is someone who has removed all of their afflictive emotions, completely eliminated, completely uprooted them. And this is the cause of liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence. And that is an arhat. Arhats also can attain nirvana, the cessation of all suffering. Even if one has a realization of impermanence and the other aspects of the Four Noble Truths, that's not enough. What's crucial is the wisdom realizing emptiness that completely eradicates afflictive emotion. That alone is the perfect remedy. For this reason, those who reject the doctrine of emptiness and whose minds are still engrossed in concepts will not be able to attain nirvana and the release from the suffering of cyclic existence. Without the complete destruction of clinging to an independently existing self, there's no way to overcome afflictive emotion. It is only through the realization of emptiness that clinging to the self is uprooted. No other way is possible. Even if the habitual tendency to assume that phenomena have an inherent independent self-existence has been temporarily suppressed by certain kinds of meditative concentrations that we might do, it will later reassert itself in much the same way as when one emerges from meditative absorption of non-perception. If you recall, we talked about the paths of a bodhisattva, the 5 paths, and there's one path called the path of meditation. And that's when the bodhisattva has had a direct realization of emptiness, and then they begin to meditate to remove whether it's called afflictive obscurations and cognitive obscurations afflictive obscurations are keeping you in samsara, and the cognitive obscurations are preventing you from becoming omniscient. So in this path of meditation, a bodhisattva has already had a direct realization of emptiness. So they are cultivating that. And when they're in that meditative absorption on emptiness, there is no dualistic appearance of anything. That is completely, they have gone to a completely non-conceptual, non-dualistic state. But when they come out of that absorption, everything looks the way it looks to us. But they know that it's empty. They have the understanding, but they still are seeing and experiencing. Their experience is very similar to our experience of the world and the way the subject object, the way things appear. And so that's what it's saying, is that even if we're able to suppress this inclination towards thinking that things exist inherently through kinds of meditations, it will eventually reassert itself if we haven't actually had the direct realization of emptiness and gone on the path of the Bodhisattva. So there's no other way of overcoming afflictive emotion than the realization that the self, the conceived object of the innate process of ego clinging, does not exist inherently. So now we're going to get into these two aspects of, you might say, emptiness. The two aspects of selflessness, and it's called the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. The selflessness of persons is referring to, when they say person, they're referring to the sense of I, me. It's not talking about your body. The body would be a phenomena, a type of phenomena, the body. What we're talking about in the selflessness of person is this idea of I or me. That's the person. That's who we think the person is. Either our I or me, or somebody else's I or me. We think is, that they're really there, that person is there. So the Shravakas, the hearers, and the Pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary Buddhas, are in complete agreement about the need to realize selflessness, but they do not consider selflessness and emptiness to be the same thing. For them, emptiness means the denial of the existence of phenomena, such as material form. And it can be a frightening, nihilistic notion. They don't agree with that. They actually think that things do exist, phenomena do exist inherently. The only thing that doesn't is the self. However, the recognition of the non-existence of a personal self, which they say has never existed at any time, for them is the perfect view in accordance with the true nature of things. But in fact, according to the Mahayanas, there is actually no difference at all between these two assertions of emptiness, the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena.
I'm going to say it's more Prasangika than Mahayana.
Yeah, I should say that. It's the highest view of Prasangika, the Mahayana, the highest Mahayana view.
There are some Mahayana schools that have different.
That's true.
Opinions.
This is kind of all in the context of Shantideva as a Mahayana practitioner.
I understand, but you don't want.
But Shantideva is
trying to
Prasangika.
barely understand, to
Yeah.
say something that's completely wrong is not a good idea.
Yeah.
We're confused enough as it is.
It's the highest Mahayana view.
You don't want people running around claiming.
I doubt everybody doing that from this particular teaching.
I mean, dare I mention, Chittamatra Hapagus.
Oh God, please. We've done Chittamatra for now, right? Let's see. All right. So the selflessness of persons means that the self, the I, is a mere conceptual label or imputation that's made on the basis of the five aggregates. So we've talked a little bit about these. In Sanskrit, they're called the skandhas, which means five different heaps, but we call them five aggregates. Aggregates, they're the five things that make up the experience of our existence. The experience of existence, you could put it that way. And these are, the first one is form. It's called form. They have different translations for these things, but I'm basically going to use the ones that I'm pretty familiar with and make sense to me. So the first one is form, and what we're talking about there is matter, the body, or material form of any being or any other object of awareness, the form of it, the material form. Then the second aggregate, this is feeling. And this is important to understand what is meant by feeling here. The feeling is the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensory experiences triggered by an object of awareness. So let's talk about that. We have we're talking about senses. The feeling is the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral sensory experiences. So there are 5 senses that we know about: the eye, ear, nose, taste, and touch. And then, according to Buddhism, there's the 6th, the mental sense. So basically, this is talking about the pleasant feelings that are due to touch, the pleasant feelings that occur due to hearing things, beautiful sounds, the pleasant things that occurred from seeing things that appear pleasant or ugly, or whatever, the sensations, the feelings, tastes. And then the mental one would be where we would talk about what we call emotions. That would be the mental sense, where we are delighted by something, thrilled by something, or angered by something, or reviled by something, or afraid of something. This is all taking place in the mental sense consciousness. So these feelings are not just emotions, but it's all the feelings that are triggered by objects of awareness of the various sense consciousnesses. So that's the aggregate of feeling. The third one is called discrimination. Sometimes it's called perception. And the discrimination is the sensory and mental process that distinguishes, recognizes, and labels things. So it's our process of naming things, telling things from being able to distinguish something from something else, whatever it may be. That's called discrimination, or sometimes they call it perception. And then the 5th aggregate is consciousness. And consciousness is awareness. It's the awareness of existence, internally and externally. It's awareness. It's not, consciousness is not the mental sense consciousness. Consciousness overall. Yeah.
So you did 1, 2, 3, form, feeling, discrimination, and then you went to 5.
Oh, sorry, you're right. Sorry, Tracy. Thank you.
And I'm like, wait, did I miss something?
Yes, you did. I missed it. It's the 4th one.
Okay.
This is an interesting one. It's called mental formations, and this took me years to understand what it was talking about. Because the way we were taught, the words we were taught were called how do they tell it? Non-compositional factors.
Oh, yeah,
Unassociated compositional factors. And it was like, what does that mean? But mental formations is probably will be easier for us once I explain this. And
by the way, there's another translation, conditioning.
Conditioning. But mental formations, and you will recognize this as soon as I tell you what it is. The habitual mental activities, propensities, and decisions occurring on a mental continuum. So basically, we're talking about our mental continuum, our mind stream, and the habitual patterns and propensities and decisions and ideas and things that pop up on our mental continuum. It's we've talked about this a lot. So that's the 4th aggregation of mental formations. And then the 5th one is consciousness, which I said is just awareness of existence, internal existence and external existence. It's awareness. So the I, the person, the label me or I itself has no objective existence. It is simply a conceptual label or imputation that we put onto all those aggregates of experience. And we say, that's me. This is the I, this is me. But there is no actual self-existent I. And this is the point here. We feel that there is. We feel very strongly that there is. We are so habituated to that. This is the thing, as I've said before, it's the I or the ego, which is basically the I and the me. The ego is actually it's related to the direct root of the suffering of samsara. It's how samsara arises, is this I, this ego. And it's due to an ignorance of how things actually are. So we're just sort of beginning to dip our toe into this idea that the I is just a mere conceptual label that we are imputing onto the way our experience of existence is. And it takes a long time to let go of the hold we have on this I, this me, because we feel as if it's the center of the center of everything for us. And we extend it by saying anything that belongs to me, mine, my family, my things, my career, anything that is me or mine, we're very, very attached to. And the problem arises when something gets in the way of that, and we identify it as being something else, some other person, some other thing, some other event, some other phenomenon that is in the way, and we reify that, and all these afflictive emotions arise because of it.
And Chris, I follow Eckhart Tolle, and on the very same topic, he says, I is, like you said, it's an ego form, and you, me. And then he says, I am, when you put I am together, I am gets you this interconnected energy where you are no longer egoistic I, but we're all together. So that's what I read on that book. It kind of makes me sense that when you say I am, it's the connection of the whole cosmos, let's say, where the I doesn't exist as an egoistic, but I am there where you are connected with everything. So the I just disappears on its own, which is a form of enlightenment. So he defines it that way, the I am.
Yeah, there are. I would agree. I mean, it's basically defining the terms,
Right.
defining the terms. So there is that I am. I think it's even in the Torah, the Bible. I mean, I think the God or something says something like I am that I am, and it's how do you interpret that? But the interpretation that would make sense is that you could say consciousness, all of consciousness, you could say is the existence, existings, and we're aspects of it, but we're all totally connected. We're totally interconnected. This is the part that the ego wants to sort of carve out a little part of consciousness or whatever, and separate off and say, this is my little kingdom, mine, and this is where we run into all our problems. This is the root of samsara, the root of suffering. So yeah, I mean, that's another way. I think it's a very every religious tradition has their mystical or esoteric aspect to it, and I think that I am that's what that's saying. It's just a larger consciousness that's completely has aspects that are all interconnected.
Correct.
And that would be one way you could view God, and that would be it wouldn't be God as an entity, an individual, and it would be the wholeness of everything, you might say. But the labels can be very tricky, because people we define those labels in different ways, and there are some traditions which would get up in arms if one was to say that God was not a discrete entity that existed separately somehow out there, because we get very attached to our beliefs, But I think like you're saying, in the esoteric views, I think that's where it's going. So selflessness of phenomena. So with the selflessness of the self, or selflessness of the person, is that there is no objective I at all. So that's the selflessness of the person. The I is just imputed upon the aggregates of our experience. The selflessness of phenomena means that even the aggregates or collections of parts, like a body, for example, or a pot, are imputed and labeled on the basis of their assembled parts. So every aggregate itself, every part of anything is itself doesn't exist inherently. It is, I mean, if you wanted to say that the leg of the table, well, the leg of the table is connected to the table. And if you went further just into the material form of what the leg of the table was, you would see that it was made out of many, many parts. We've been through this. It goes down to the subatomic level, and boom, you're out in the origins of the universe, the way everything is connected to everything else. So that's would be the selflessness of phenomena. And what's interesting about this is our teachers always told us that the easier thing to have a realization of first is the selflessness of persons. And I always would have thought that would be more difficult because we're so attached to me and I. But they say it's the selflessness of phenomena that's more difficult for people to actually have a realization of. I think because it completely collapses the way we view things as existing inherently out there. It really collapses our view. And I think this may be why the Hinayana tradition, they felt, the selflessness of the self, the selflessness of persons, they agreed with that, but they did not agree with the selflessness of phenomena. So this is what...
And remind me again, Christopher, the selflessness of phenomena is that nothing, I mean, like phenomena is something, like an experience, an outcome based on
phenomena is
an effect.
You're
It's
right.
an effect.
Phenomena, a thought is a phenomenon,
Okay.
Everything's, I mean, the walls of a house, the car,
They
the
use
sky.
term if it's knowable.
Yeah,
Knowables.
any knowable
So phenomena is knowable.
any knowable object of consciousness, you could say. You could say
Okay.
phenomena. That's one way of putting it. So so the only difference between the two emptinesses, the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena, lies in the thing that's considered to be empty. Realize
again.
the only difference between selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena lies in the thing that you're thinking is supposed to be empty.
So the object of
The object of, yes, you would call the object of negation. And the selflessness of persons, the object of negation is an inherently existing I or me. And the selflessness of phenomena, the object of negation is an inherently existing anything.
knowable.
Knowable. Nothing exists on its own inherently and separately.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way our particular belief system and the way our aggregates work together, that it appears that that's the way things are to us.
Just a little bit. We're doing this, and then we'll go for a while. I know
So-
it's hard to understand. You're puffing.
So realizing the selflessness of persons will undermine the root of cyclic existence. Realizing the selflessness of persons will allow one to become completely liberated from the suffering of cyclic existence and being trapped in cyclic existence. The selflessness of persons. While the realization of the selflessness of phenomena undermines clinging to phenomena in general, clinging to anything in general, grasping at something as if it's really exists out there. And and again, when we do that, it causes us all sorts of problems. we're unable to let go when we should let go of things, where we get angry if things don't exist the way we want them to exist. I mean, there's all kinds of things, all kinds of problems arise by grasping onto phenomena as if they existed inherently. So the Shravakas and
Christopher,
yeah,
Christopher, can I ask a question
yeah,
for clarification? So I'm thinking about what you just said in the context of the six perfections. And, if you give up the concept of the idea of a self or a selfless of persons or selflessness of phenomenon, but at the same time, you are supposed to have joy about virtuous activities. It seems a little bit unclear to me how, on the one hand, you have an emotional reaction, quote, slash, maybe even affiliation. I don't want to use the word attachment because that's probably too strong, to a phenomenon. But on the other hand, all phenomenons are empty of inherent existence. So I'm a little bit unclear how to think about the relationship of those two things with one another.
in terms of the six perfections.
Well, the six perfections is just an example. So, for example, most of the six perfections are, consistent in my mind with what we're talking about here, the selflessness of phenomenon or the selflessness of persons. But the one that seems to be a bit at odds with it is this joy about virtuous activity.
Oh, the joyful effort.
Yeah, the joyful effort. So maybe it's the effort that is it, but if you're joyous about something you're doing, I know you don't want to be attached to it, but then you somehow recognize that as a phenomenon that you're joyous about. And maybe I'm not being terribly articulate here.
Okay, yeah, I think I understand. So what we have to understand is the whole context of the Bodhisattva path and these six perfections is about removing suffering. It's about relieving suffering and the problems that occur because of suffering. That's the point. I mean, if you go back to Buddha's first noble truth, there's suffering and there's a cause to it, and there's a way to stop it. There's a pathway to do that. So what we're talking about in enthusiastic effort or the joyful effort, like with Bodhisattva, is that it's a recognition that, like we were talking before, like with Ajay, when he brought up everything is interconnected and interdependent. It's a recognition that no matter how challenging it may be as a bodhisattva on this path, trying to if ultimately help others, to awaken others, and to awaken oneself first and then awaken others, it can be challenging because it's a big task. We are so primordially habituated to this idea of me and mine and I, that it is a big thing to turn that around. But the joyful effort there is the understanding that this is going to release the suffering. I mean, of whoever you may be dealing with, but all beings in general. Because once we all actually recognize the interconnected, interdependent nature of what existence is, then there will no longer be fear. There will no longer be suffering. There will no longer be the samsaric world that has sort of manifested because of this wrong view. And so that would be what your object of, if you want to call it taking delight or joy in, is that you're working to sort of undo a big mistake that has caused a lot of suffering for the interconnected existence of consciousness. So,
so in this sense, emptiness itself is a phenomenon that doesn't that is not a independent, self-existing phenomenon.
All right, let's go back to the key in the drawer, right? You open the drawer, you expect to find your keys in that drawer where they always are, and they're not there. And the only thing that happens is you recognize that there's an absence of what you thought should be there. So it's not a phenomenon itself. It's an absence of what you thought was a phenomenon, what you thought should be there. So that's what emptiness is talking about. And
yes, it is dependent. To answer his question.
Oh, was it?
correctly.
Emptiness is dependent on, yes.
That's all I was
Yeah.
asking.
Oh, I thought he said it was a phenomenon. I mean, an existing phenomenon. So your question again was emptiness dependent?
No, my question is, you're right. I mean, emptiness is a phenomenon that itself is emptiness is empty of inherent existence.
Mm.
And I guess all I'm thinking about, and again, I'm not maybe thinking correctly or articulating it clearly, but it's this concept of you invest effort in a particular phenomenon, as I was trying to define it, whatever that phenomenon is, whether it's getting rid of suffering for other people, and maybe it's more semantic, is the phenomenon is suffering still empty of inherent existence, although or is suffering empty? So again, I'm not putting this together and asking the question in a coherent way. So I need to think maybe a little bit more about this and let you continue. Because something you said this triggered this in my mind, and maybe it's the language, maybe it's the description, the adjectives, the words, maybe it's again this idea that definitionally in our language they may mean certain things that are not quite the same as what they're meant to mean in Buddhist understanding or Buddhist philosophy. So I guess I was thinking that I guess it's possible then. I mean, you're explaining the six perfections as all aimed at alleviating suffering, which is true. You're explaining that all phenomena are selfless. That is, they don't are empty of inherent existence, and therefore we shouldn't be attached to anything because it has no inherent existence. And yet, if I think about joyous effort or joyous perseverance, I'm thinking about the actual effort of the action I'm trying to alleviate, not the general action of suffering in general, but let's say, somebody's cut their finger. So, I'm attached, and I hate to use the word attachment, but, I see that as an event and I do something to fix that event or change that event, but I'm still seeing that as an event and an occurrence, a happening, an event that I'm still supposed to think about in terms of some joyous feeling as I'm executing my.
Right, because you're helping.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think that maybe it will help to understand that attachment is not the same as love. Love is basically the wish that may you be happy. So when you're actually trying to alleviate someone's suffering or help an animal or whatever it may be, you're wishing that they be happy. You're
Does it
wishing.
require
Yeah.
attachment?
It doesn't mean
require a diluted sense of attachment.
Right. Attachment is a delusion. It's a delusion that arises from thinking that the thing exists inherently.
Also, one good way to think about attachment is often described as an exaggeration. So you are exaggerating the wonderfulness of something, or you're exaggerating the horribleness. So when you're all of this discussion, is all of the study of Buddhism and all these books on our shelves and in our, all the things we're memorizing, all of it, the entire Buddha appeared as Buddha, and all these Bodhisattvas all appeared to alleviate deluded minds who have put themselves into a state of suffering. That is what Buddhism is for. Buddhism would not exist if there was no suffering. So all of the examination of these detailed discussions on what is attachment and so forth, you always have to remember the context of this discussion is happening within an overarching ginormous system of removing the delusions of countless sentient beings who are doing all kinds of crazy things that create cascading causes that come into all forms of suffering, physical and mental and so forth suffering. So, I mean, so that is important to remember. There is no need to discuss any of this if there is no suffering. We don't need to study the 6 professions if there were no suffering in the cosmos, in the existent universes. There would be no point of a Buddha if there was no suffering. So, I mean, I think this is a really key thing to always to remember.
Yeah. I think
I think sometimes can get a little bit lost in the weeds that we forget what Buddha appeared as Buddha for.
being,
And also, give me the finger. No, because this is, I mean, sometimes we forget the general context, and I'm just feeling it's also helpful to remember consciousness. His Holiness put it in a very simple, the role of consciousness is to be subjective. Purely speaking, and not, he doesn't mean our Western value judgment definition of subjective. What he's saying is consciousness, the role of consciousness is to apprehend subjects. So the role of consciousness is to notice that something exists. We collectively in this realm we are going to call samsara have mistaken consciousness and a very complicated cascading series of deluded thoughts about how things exist. Consciousness can also exist in a way that is uncontaminated. That's what we would call a Buddha. So we're in a so consciousness will always have a subject. When it is an uncontaminated consciousness, it will be in a it will not be experiencing what we have labeled a system that we all know so well. It will not be experiencing its existence within the context of samsara. Again, without that in the back of your mind all the time, you have to own where you are. You are a deluded, afflicted being stuck in a cyclic existence we term samsara. But if you were not afflicted, you would still have an appearing realm. Something would be appearing to your consciousness. It would not be lights out. And that's important too. I mean, these two things of the whole purpose of Buddhism is because a massive group formation delusion has arisen and we're stuck in it. But don't think that your consciousness is going to just poof go away when you've solved this. Anyway, I think those are important background thoughts, because without those, you can somehow concretize Buddhism in a way that, and all these concepts in a way that they're not meant to be concretized. Anyway.
yeah. I just want to reiterate that attachment and love are not the same thing. And so it's not that we want to be attached to the idea of helping somebody. It's we are helping out of a sense, may you be happy. And
Okay, you know, if you were in a flood and people were drowning and you just spontaneously started helping them, you would not say, I am attached to each of these people. And you're just like
you would just be doing
what's
it,
needed.
right. And that's kind of, that's not a bad metaphor, you know, of what a Buddha or a Bodhisattva is trying
When
to do.
they see us, that's what they see.
Yeah.
We are.
So, let's get back to this. The Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas think there's a big difference, however, between the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. Whereas Mahayana says they're just two aspects of emptiness. The Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas say that the selflessness of phenomena, to realize that, that's not necessary. You don't need to do that. You know, all you have to do is to liberate yourself from cyclic existence, and the way to do that is to realize that you have no self, the selflessness of the person, and they say that's the only thing that matters. This means that for them, existent phenomena are not empty. In other words, they do inherently exist, whereas the personal self, which they say has at any time existed, it's as unreal as a rabbit's horns, that there is no self at all. Therefore, they have no use for the belief in the selflessness of phenomena, and so they debate without realizing that a personal self, which is imputed in dependence on the five aggregates, is in fact the very same thing as a phenomenal self, like the self of the table or something, or the self of the cup. We don't call it the self of the cup, but we'll say, as if the cup was something, we'll say the cup's design, the cup's color, the cup's function, as if the cup was somehow the self. So this is what you would call the self of phenomena, thinking that there actually is some existing thing called the cup, where it's actually just a label that we've imputed based upon the aggregates and how these aggregates may be functioning. So it's in that sense, there's no difference between the selflessness of the person, the I, or the selflessness of the cup. There's no difference according to Mahayana. But the Shravakas are saying, oh, no, there's a big difference. This does exist inherently, but the self does not, is what they're saying. So this is where this debate comes. So, you know, when we look at this carefully, we'll see, like I just said, we'll say things, we'll see that the absence of a personal self and the absence of a phenomenal self are actually the same, like the same thing. We'll say things like my arms, my legs, my mind, or your hair, your smile, your personality. And when we're referring to a person, whether it's ourselves or someone else, in the same way that we'll say the ocean's floor, the planet's atmosphere, the table's leg, you know, as if that there was something inherently existing called the ocean or the planet, when in reality it's exactly the same. There is no actual inherently existing planet. It's just a label that we put on this particular collection of aggregates and their function and all of that kind of thing. In other words, there's no difference according to the Mahayana view, but there is a difference for the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas. So what he's saying is that to understand that the selflessness of persons is just an instance or a category of the selflessness of phenomena. So it'd be like saying the selflessness of phenomena is the genus tree, and the selflessness of persons is the species juniper. It's sort of like that, you know, that it's an aspect or an instance of selflessness in general is what Mahayana is saying.
Geshe is in the middle of sending all these photos and videos of his retreat.
That's pretty cool.
You want to look at it, just grab my camera. You can see.
So here's what happens when we have the specific belief in an independently existing personal self, a specific belief in the I, the me. Afflictive obscurations like greed, anger, fear, craving, shame, and so on arise. This comes from believing in an inherently existing I or me. That's where we get those afflictive emotions. That's where they arise. From the general belief in independently self-existing phenomena, cognitive obscurations arise, namely the concepts of what they call, we talked about this before, the three spheres. The three spheres of that there's a subject that's experiencing, there's an object out there, and there is some kind of interaction taking place between the subject and object. So the cognitive obscurations are saying these three things, the subject, the object, and the action, all exist independently, inherently. They're their own thing. When in reality, they're not. They're not. They're completely connected. One, there is no object without a subject. There is no action taking place unless you have the subject and object working together. So the whole thing is a completely interconnected, not inherent independent system at all. So phenomena are the same way. No phenomena actually exists independently like that, the way it seems like it does to us. And so those having a realization of the selflessness of phenomena removes those cognitive obscurations to omniscience. This is how a Buddha becomes omniscient. I think this is why they say an understanding of the selflessness of phenomena is more a harder thing, more difficult thing to do. The first thing we should focus on, they say, is getting a grasp or letting go of the grasp of understanding the selflessness of the self, the selflessness of the person. That's our first job, and to sort of have an understanding that it's actually the same thing as the selflessness of phenomena. So the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas say that they're able to get rid of all their afflictive emotions simply by having a realization of the Four Noble Truths. And that's how the cessation of nirvana is attained, in the same way as a fire goes out when all of its fuel has been consumed by the fire. However, the Mahayana Prasangikas have shown that it's impossible to know ultimate truth, which is emptiness. Emptiness is ultimate truth, without having a realization of emptiness or ultimate truth. There's no way you could know ultimate truth unless you had a realization of it. There's a further drawback to the position of the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, and that this realization of the selflessness of person leads only to the elimination of these afflictive obscurations. It leads only to the elimination of our afflictive emotions, but it does not lead to the elimination of the cognitive obscurations, the misunderstandings that we have. So it's not a complete realization. So there's a problem that occurs with the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas because of this. So at stanza 45, it says, and this is Shantideva talking. You say there's liberation in the instant that defilements are entirely forsaken. Yet those who from defilements are set free continue to display the influence of karma. And the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas say that's only for a while, because it's certain that the causes of rebirth, which are cravings, no longer exist. So the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas maintain that simply by overcoming their afflictive emotions, all suffering will be removed, and that it's not necessary to have any other kind of realization. That they will achieve the cessation of samsaric existence, and they will exist in nirvana as arhats, because they have extinguished all of their past karmas and emotions and craving, all of that.
Mistakenly think.
Yeah, and even though that they, once they've had this realization of the selflessness of persons, even though for the remainder of perhaps their physical life, there may be some residue karma that they experience based on their past, karma and things like that. When they pass away, that will all be gone, and they will never have another rebirth. They will just be in nirvana. So, Shantideva says,
So they say.
that's what they believe. So Shantideva says in stanza 46, yes, they have no craving through defilement, but like their ignorance, why should they not have craving undefiled? So we'll explain this. The Prasangika agrees that the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha arhats are no longer subject to rebirth resulting from karma and afflictive emotions. They deny, however, that they remain in the solitary kind of lights out peace of nirvana, like a blown out candle or an extinguished flame, as they believe they do. On the contrary, nothing is holding back all the causes for the appearance of what is called a subtle mental body. That the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas will manifest what is called a subtle mental body. A mental body is similar to a body made of subtle particles, not the subtlest like the body of a Buddha, but it's a little bit like a dream body that is produced by mental consciousness. So if we think about when we're having a dream and there's, a body in the dream, this is sort of like what happens to the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. They have kind of like this dream body. Although arhats do not have afflictive craving, the afflictive emotions craving, due to clinging at an inherently existing self from having meditated on and realized the selflessness of persons, they do have a non-afflictive craving because they haven't meditated on and perfectly realized the selflessness of phenomena. Since they haven't completely overcome the cause of ignorance, they are not in any way immune to its effect. So now it goes into what actually happens to the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas because they haven't had this realization of the selflessness of phenomena. So Prasangika says in stanza 47, this craving is produced by virtue of sensation, and sensation, this they surely have. Concepts linger still within their minds, and it is to these concepts that they cling. So for the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha arhats, craving arises from feelings or sensations, and even arhats experience sensations on account of their propensity toward ignorance, because they haven't realized the selflessness of phenomena. They're actually not completely liberated. The continuum of their subtle aggregates is not severed, and it remains for them to enter the Mahayana path. The Prasangikas assert that such arhats don't take rebirth in the world, since the causes for reappearing in samsara, mainly the negative emotions, are no longer present. They no longer have the negative emotions. Nevertheless, since they don't have a perfect realization of emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of phenomena, their minds are still oriented toward conceptuality. And they have a feeling of avoidance or aversion toward the idea of samsara, and a feeling of craving or clinging to the idea of nirvana. They're not in a state of perfect peace that's free from conceptuality. So we need to apply this to ourselves in thinking that, somehow, samsara is bad, nirvana is good. And they talk about the equality, actually, of samsara and nirvana. Samsara and nirvana are both dependently arising things. And we need to understand this. It's somehow connected to your question, Brian, because we have a tendency to not have a complete understanding of what we are negating. So just to say that we would be attached to helping others is we're not understanding what the difference between love and attachment. And we need to understand very clearly the difference between love and attachment. Love being, may you be happy. And it's not, may you be happy because you're my child. May you be happy because I'm a bodhisattva and you're a suffering whatever in samsara, and I'm helping you. You know, it's not like that. It's just, may you be happy, whoever you are. May you be happy, you evil politician that I hate. You know, we need to look at ourselves in this regard. We need to cultivate a view towards others where we're not saying when we're on the road and somebody cuts us off, that idiot, that jerk, that asshole. That's not, we need to stop doing that. If we're seriously on this bodhisattva path, we need to begin to cultivate another way of viewing. You know, may you be happy. And we have to have a very, very big view of things in order to overcome the attachment that we have to, well, aversion and attachment are two sides of the same coin, really. So stanza 48. Stanza 48, Shantideva says, the mind that has not realized emptiness may be halted, but it will once again arise, just as from a non-perceptual absorption. Therefore, one must train in emptiness. So if you haven't realized emptiness, it will be like the bodhisattva who's still on the path of meditation. They'll be in this meditation, and they could be that way for a long time. And everything would seem like, oh, I have realized emptiness, nothing exists, blah, 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 blah. But when they come out of it, when they come out of that meditation, everything is the same again. They haven't actually completely gotten rid of all the cognitive obscurations, which is a result of having a realization of the selflessness of phenomena. And so this is what happens to the Pratyeka Buddhas and the Shravakas. So as a result, what happens to their mind is their minds come to a halt and they rest for a time in the expanse of cessation, in nirvana, only to manifest and take rebirth later on. Their mind's latent propensity for ignorance, as well as their lack of afflictive emotions, act as the continual causes for the generation of their mental bodies. Because they haven't gained a perfect realization of emptiness, the antidote through which all concepts vanish, they remain in a condition similar to the absorption of non-perception that occurs in the fourth bodhisattva path of meditation, or else they achieve an unconscious state of mind that is lacking in sensation or awareness. Just kind of like out of it. Therefore, if one wishes to go totally beyond sorrow, one should meditate on emptiness, because without it, it's impossible to transcend suffering, either temporarily or ultimately. So this, then he gives some references to sutras. This is from the Lotus Sutra. This is something the Buddha said. Thus you say that you have passed beyond all pain, but from the sorrows of samsara only are you free. You have not yet transcended every misery. The Buddha's highest vehicle, Mahayana, you should now pursue. And then Nagarjuna himself, in his exposition of bodhicitta, says, the Arhat Shravakas, till the Buddhas called them, rest in wisdom bodies drunk on concentration. Roused by the Buddhas, they take on various forms and work with love for being's sake. Merit and wisdom gathered in, they reach the awakening of Buddhahood. So it's similar to what I was saying last week, this image that the monks would give us of that there's the Arhat, the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha Arhats are like this, you know, this Buddha that's asleep, you know, on the beach and is just drunk in concentration and not even aware of all the suffering that's going on, and not even aware that these enlightened beings are out there, you know, helping the people from the sea of samsara reach enlightenment. And the Arhats need to basically wake up. And what the way that monks put it was kind of cute. The Buddhists come and, you know, tap them on the shoulder and say, hello, you need to wake up. There's something more you have to do. And they have to go back and do the whole bodhisattva path, which is in a way more difficult because they have entrained their mind to be thinking in a different way. So it's a whole relearning process that they have to go through which is why in the Mahayana they stress bodhicitta so much. From the very beginning, they stress it and everything that they talk about. So that as we develop on the path, we are developing this idea of becoming enlightened for the benefit of sentient beings. That it's not, the idea is not to escape from everything, not to escape from samsara and escape from the fear of it and escape from the pain of it. No, we transcend it, and then we're able to help others to transcend it as well. We go right back into it, but we're not affected by it in the way that we're afraid we would be, because we've had a direct realization of both kinds of emptiness, achieved a liberation from samsara and omniscience, and are enlightened beings that can really, really help, in all manners of forms. So now we're getting close to the end of this section. I'm going to skip the next 3 stanzas because it's, according to some commentaries, they've either been misplaced and they're not in the correct position, or they weren't even composed by Shantideva. So I'm just going to leave them out. You all can read them, but I'm going to go to the last part. And this is stanza 52. And I'm titling this, Emptiness is the Real Solution. So here's stanza 52. To linger and abide within samsara, freed from every craving and from every fear, in order to achieve the good of those who ignorantly suffer. Such is the fruit that emptiness will bear. So, someone who has realized emptiness doesn't remain in samsara due to attachment, or due to the power of their emotional and mental afflictions, or because of their negative karma. Nor do they fall to the extreme of nihilism due to the fear that arises because of the many kinds of sufferings that occur in samsara. They don't go to nihilism. The result of realizing emptiness is a person who can eternally benefit sentient beings with enthusiasm, great compassion, and joy. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that we need to integrate our awakened heart and mind of bodhicitta with the realization of emptiness. In this way, due to wisdom, we will not be trapped in the cycle of existence, and due to compassion, we will not remain in the solitary tranquility of the Buddha on the beach, nirvana, because of our compassion. For the sake of sentient beings, those of us who realize emptiness and the mirage-like appearance of phenomena will continue to dwell in the world, will be free of its defects, for we'll be freed from the 2 extremes. Though we dwell in the world, the ability to live in the world, they'll say we'll be like lotuses that grow in the mud. That's the image that they always give. It'll be that we will be able to dwell in samsara, but we'll be like a lotus that grows out of the mud, because we will have completely removed all of our obscurations, and we'll know exactly what's going on. We actually won't have any fear at all. It's hard to imagine that, but this is what they're saying. Because of those realizations, we will have no fear at all. We will actually be enlightened beings who can take on any forms. And the whole point is to come back into this existence to help the others who we are connected to. That's the point. So it is possible for us to serve the needs of sentient beings forever, is what His Holiness says. On the other hand, it's precisely through not understanding the equality of samsara and nirvana that a mind sees faults in samsara and advantages in nirvana, and leans exclusively toward nirvana. So I'm sure we've all had this feeling. I know I used to. Like when I was younger, I just want to get off of this. I want to get out of this. I want to be off this world. I was seeing the problems. Even at a young age, I was seeing this is not right. I need to escape it, in other words. It was my feeling. And I think that's maybe what the feeling is of the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, is that they're getting out of it, they're escaping it. But if you think about what reality is, interconnected, everything is interconnected, everything is interdependent. There's no escape from that. That's what reality is. We're never going to be able to escape from that. So the option and the logical option is, whoa, get a grip on what the mistake has been that we've made that's caused all this suffering, this attachment to this I and me and thinking everything else exists inherently. Have a realization of emptiness, and then work to help everybody else do the same thing so that we get out of this suffering. That's the way to do it. If you want to say escape, that's the way to escape from it. Not to run away, but to just, it's like as a Buddha, you're wearing this protective armor that can never ever be broken. And you will only be helping others all the time.
I think it's the compassion in Buddhism, that's the very emphasis.
Yeah.
That takes us, because it's very easy to get the misconception of trying to escape from this suffering for yourself. And that's the ego coming from the backside to liberate for you. See, that's a misconception, like you just said, and I feel it too. But I think it's very important to remember that you're doing it with a compassion for the whole being. Because there's a very easy way of getting delusion on that one too.
Yeah. I mean, His Holiness says that actually implied in this realization of emptiness, implied in that is great compassion. That's why the Bodhisattva is doing it. That's why you would realize both the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena, so that you become enlightened. And the whole purpose of enlightenment is to help other beings, to bring this basically interconnected, interdependent system that thinks that it's somehow all in little separate bits, bring it together, because that's what we are. It's part of what we are. And the implication in having a direct realization of emptiness, both of persons and phenomena, is great compassion, because that's what it's about.
Love and compassion.
Yeah, love and compassion. Yeah, love and compassion. Love, may you be happy, and may you not suffer. And this is how to do it. So yeah, and we're just about done. We're just finished with this, which was good. So stanza 53 says, therefore, it is incorrect to find fault with this view of emptiness. Basically, Shantideva is referring to the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, saying, we don't need, the emptiness of phenomena is not important. We just need the emptiness of the self, and then we're out of here. So with every doubt abandoned, we should meditate on emptiness. Then stanza 54 says, afflictive passion, like afflictive emotions, and the veil upon cognition, the cure for their obscurity is emptiness. So, in other words, the afflictive obscurations and the cognitive obscurations that we were talking about. Afflictive obscurations being the afflictive emotions, and the cognitive obscurations believing that things exist inherently, subject, object, and the action in between them, specifically is what they're talking about. Those things, those are all sort of uprooted by having a direct realization of emptiness. And so, how then shall they not meditate on this who wish for swift attainment of omniscience? So, emptiness is the only cure for the darkness of our afflictive emotional obscurations, which is the principal obstacle to liberation from samsara, and our cognitive obscurations, which obstruct omniscience. If we wish to swiftly rid ourselves of these two obscurations and attain enlightenment, we should by all means meditate on emptiness. Then stanza 55. Whatever is the source of suffering, let that be the object of our fear. But emptiness will allay our every grief. How could it be for us a thing of dread? This is another issue. The Shantideva was saying that the Shravakas are actually afraid of emptiness. They're afraid that it will mean there will be nothingness. You know, this is why they don't like the idea of the emptiness of phenomena, because they think it means there will be nothing. Nothing at all will exist. And that's not the case. That's not the case. It's just the way we view it is the problem. The way we view it. We have a wrong view, is what they say.
Well, and in this stanza here, it refers to emptiness as voidness, which is
Yeah.
a lot of the problem Westerners have, using emptiness meaning void of something, and that's not what emptiness is.
Again, it's these terms, they have to be very clearly defined. Alexander Berzin loves to use voidness, but he defines it exactly the same way as emptiness. So we always have to remember in every situation when we're together that we need to clearly define our terms so we understand what it is we're saying, you know, because we really can misinterpret things because of the terms. So it's right. Basically, stanza 55 is saying it is right, it's correct to fear something that causes suffering for us in this and future lives. That's correct. But since the realization of emptiness completely uproots all suffering, how could that possibly be a cause of fear? There's nothing about a realization of emptiness that we should be afraid of. And then the last stanza of this particular section is, if such a thing as I existed, indeed, then terrors, granted, will torment it. But since no self or I exists at all, what is there left for fears to terrify? So if there truly existed an independent, separate I that was not interconnected with everything else, then it would make sense to be afraid. I mean, you know, it would be like, oh my God, I'm alone, I'm separated. I mean, everything out there is scary, you know. But if we actually realize that no me actually exists that way. The way we exist is the way we're talking about. This completely interconnected aspects of consciousness, and then the forms that the consciousness takes. And so if you have this direct realization of emptiness, and you're liberated from samsara, and you have this omniscience in your enlightened being, well, there's nothing to be afraid of. And so that's basically how this particular section ends. So they're saying fearfulness should therefore be thrown aside. Instead, we should be quick to meditate on emptiness, to understand emptiness, and then meditate on it, think about it, become familiar with it, really familiarize ourselves with emptiness. That basically, I think, is the, if you want to say, the key to happiness, you know, it would be. Because as His Holiness said, implied in a direct realization of emptiness is this great compassion and love. Because that's what it's about. That's what it's all about. So, and again, we go back to the whole point of Buddhism, as we've started with. It's about alleviating suffering, actually uprooting it completely. And that's the path we're on. That's what we're attempting to do. It's a big thing, because we've been going in the kind of the wrong direction for, well, they say beginningless time, whatever that means, you know. I mean, it's just a long time. I mean, we have a strong habit. So there's a lot that we have to, as we begin to turn this around for ourselves, we're going to come up against our own misunderstandings, our own afflictive emotions, our own ignorance, and it's going to kind of hit us in the face, and we're going to go, what do I do about this? And the idea, I think, to remember is it's about alleviating suffering and great compassion and love. We need to have that great compassion and love for ourselves as we're doing this. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up because of our particular failures or a particular afflictive emotions we have, or a particular lack of ignorance. We shouldn't be that way. What we should do is go, I'm going to use this, if we want to call it a problem, I'm going to use this as part of the path, and I'm going to figure out how to transform this and make it part of the path so that I can learn something from this. You know, look at it that way rather than I'm a failure, you know, and give up. I mean, we have to when we have like again the path of a bodhisattva, the 6 perfections basically, they have compassion and wisdom, and in the center of them is enthusiastic, joyful effort. We have to have that enthusiastic, joyful effort. We have to figure out ways to do that for ourselves. And the way that I've done it is to go, all right, yes, I have afflictive emotions. Yes, I'm ignorant. Yes, I have all these obscurations. However, I'm on this path. The path makes sense to me. I'm engaged in it, and I'm going to figure out how to transform all of my afflictive emotions and learn from them and make them part of the path of learning to become, enlightened for the benefit of all beings, and not get down. I mean, yes, sometimes you can get down, but pick yourself up, get that enthusiasm going. All right. And so dedication prayers. May the view of emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May the view of bodhicitta that's not yet born arise and grow. Yeah. And may we always, in all of our lives, meet the Dharma and meet very qualified teachers who can help us along the path. Okay. Now,
Amen, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And all the people said.
and all the people say, Amen.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. I'll stop this recording.